What is going on, y'all? I am joined by Brian Gottlieb, a man best described as the guy, capital T, capital G at Flesh and Blood, the game design guy for a very large, very successful game. Brian, would you care to expound on your actual role here before we start rating the cards? Tell people what you do and why it's actually fair that I am giving you the hard mode of card ratings this time.
Well, if I could figure out exactly what it is that I do, my friend, I would give you a fulsome and accurate breakdown. But I do a lot of things, many of which are game design related, working with my good friend, the creator of Flesh and Blood, James White. Him, my friend Chris Gehring, and I are kind of the trinity that designs most of the cards for Flesh and Blood. There is, of course, input from our development team as well, which I also have a hand in leading and managing. And then I do a bunch of broadcasty stuff. I literally just got back from our World Championships where I was part of the broadcast team there. I'm involved in some businessy things that people definitely don't care about. So I do a lot of things with and for Flesh and Blood, and I am basically living my dream right now. I have weaseled into the role that I always wanted in the gaming sphere, and I love it. I wouldn't trade it for anything. And I mean, you've known me for a long time now. This is what I do. I think about games. I obsess about games. I basically don't care about anything else except my family. And yeah,
Good save
it's
there.
fantastic.
That was a good, like, you got it in just at the end, right when it could have been clipped out of context. You got it in there. Right? That's a good save.
Yeah. My wife would not have been happy if that clip made it to her desk. So yeah, I have to be very clear about that. And it is true. She will always come first. I love her. But yeah, it's a very, very gaming centric life that I have chosen to lead.
I sort of consider you like, when the government appoints someone like the guy in charge of a problem, they call them the czar, right? I consider you sort of the Flesh and Blood czar. Like, you're not the president of Flesh and Blood, but you're like the guy who does the stuff.
I do a lot of things. It's always I just want to make very clear it is James White's baby. He is entirely in charge, works harder than any person on the planet, has taught me so much about game design, about Flesh and Blood. Never want to make it sound like I have usurped him or in any way replaced him.
Yeah.
He is still absolutely the dude. But
He's
I
the
am
president
very
in the
happy.
analogy.
Yes,
That's
very
where I was
happy to
going with that.
play.
Yeah.
Very happy to play either his right or left hand, depending on which one he needs at the moment.
But today, you're here to rate Marvel Snap cards. Now, you kind of blew this out of the water last time you were here. You were incredibly good, I suppose, unsurprisingly, at figuring out, okay, this is the context, this is the context, this is the context. And since you've come on, I had Matt Place, another like very high level, very experienced game designer on, and I was like, all right, I'm going to learn from Brian. I'm going to give him the hard ones. These are the hard ones. Like, this is going to be the hard course. Cards that I think you're going to have to intuit a lot of context about, that I don't want you to romp through this one. You might do that anyway, but I don't want you to. This is no longer the easy mode intro course. We're going to be doing some stuff.
I am skeptical it's going to be a romp. The last time I learned or heard anything about Marvel Snap would be the last time I was on your show. So I have just complete distance since then. Nothing against Marvel Snap. Again, I'll just say it to kick things off. I think Marvel Snap is an incredible game. I think it's a brilliant game. I have all the respect in the world for it. But one, I am very freaking busy. Two, I can't figure out what my jumping on point would be to rejoin at this point. I'm just too far behind. So yeah, that's kind of where my relationship stands with the game.
That is where I think a lot of people's relationship stands. Like, wow, this game is awesome. And then you like, I've had it described to me as like there were multiple bets being made at the same time, where they were like, here, we're going to make all these bets on what the future of card games looks like. And they nailed all of those. And then it was like, all right, we're going to do the same thing for the future of card game acquisition. And I think they probably didn't nail those nearly as well. But so I think a lot of people are in your position where it's like, I think this game is amazing. I don't know what I'm supposed to do in order to engage with the part of it I want to engage with.
Dude, acquisition is so hard. Business modeling is so hard. Like you have to sell cards. You
Yeah.
have to sell cards to get people in the positions you need to be able to design a game effectively, to be able to develop a game effectively. And the answer of how you are supposed to do that, there's no one size fits all answer. You know, everyone wants something different, and there's so many different purchasers of games that have different financial situations, different wants, different desires, just things they want to be able to get. Some people want to chase variants forever. Some people want the cheapest game pieces they can get. And all of these things fight against each other, and it's so hard to get it right.
That is an extremely astute observation, which is, again, justifying, all right, we're going to give you the hard ones. We're starting with Deadpool here. Now, Deadpool 1/1, when this is destroyed, return it to your hand with double its power.
So this feels old to me. Am I like I feel like I remember playing
Yeah,
Deadpool back in
he's
the
been
day.
out the
Okay.
entire game.
Yeah. And I feel like I also remember it being good back when I played. And the real triggering thing here for me is double.
Mhm.
Double gets out of hand very quickly, typically. I'm not seeing a safety valve here. Now, certainly, like rules could have changed since I last played, but I suspect Deadpool is very freaking strong and maybe like format defining. But we'll see as my context develops about where Marvel Snap stands right now, if I am even close.
He's good. He's limited in scope in terms of, you're correct about double, right? And I kind of want to, I'm going to throw this one back to you just to talk about double as a piece of text to put on a card and what that actually implies in games that don't have an inherent time limit the way Marvel Snap does, right? Because I think it's a much different thing when you're doubling resources in a game that doesn't immediately end and you will be able to cash those resources in than it is in Marvel Snap, where it's very much like you double it, and up to a certain point, that's really good because effectively it serves as winning a lane, right? You double this guy enough, and he says one win a lane, and it's like, okay, that's really good output. Is what I'm putting in for the input good enough as I'm doing this? Can I get this as more of a free roll? How much am I making this happen? And also, how dependent is it on only happening on my good draws? Which, if there is a weakness to Deadpool, it is that this is a turnover turn thing, and Marvel Snap has an inherent time limit, which means it is not going to be the best card at doing the double thing unless you draw it very early.
Yeah, fair enough. I guess low investment capacity to take over single lane seems like it would be enough to get me interested. Um, but to me, the thing that I can't possibly answer is like, what kind of resets are there? How effective is it to double? Where does doubling fall in like? Say I double 5 times,
Yeah.
right? Okay, I've achieved my quest. I've gotten all this doubling to go down. What else exists in the game at this point? Is that even a number that is meaningful anymore? I hope to develop that as we move through this.
Yeah, that's definitely the bit that makes this a little bit tricky. Yeah, because you look at doubles and it's also like, what can I add on to that double as I'm starting out to make the double matter more the more I do it, right? Like if Deadpool gets an additional 2 power before he starts doubling, that makes all of your doubles a lot more impactful, that kind of thing. And
You know what's cool about Marvel Snap, though? I'll try not to do this every single card that
you're
we talk
allowed.
about. I don't want to just go on endless soliloquies, but like almost every card game has fixed objective you are trying to achieve. Do 20 damage to someone, do 40 damage to someone, gain your lore, whatever it is that you have to do over the course of that game. Marvel Snap's goal is do more than your opponent.
Yeah, it's
So
fluid.
they're almost like immune to power creep in this very cool way because everyone is always trying to do more. And sure, maybe cards get invalidated, but I don't think like the game never ends. I shouldn't say never. I'm sure there's probably exceptions to this. The game typically would not end 3 turns earlier than you would expect it to. It's mostly going through the same progression every time.
Yeah, I think one of the things people watching this will hear, and they'll be like, "There's no power creep," and they'll be like, "What are you talking about?" Because like the methods of efficiency, or that the amount you can do, will get bigger or smaller depending on the balance changes. But yes, like that is largely the coolest thing about Marvel Snap, is that your goals are fluid. Now, the downside of that, now you did touch on this though, is that losing Marvel Snap always feels like some of your cards didn't matter. They got invalidated by the nature of how the game plays out. And I think those two things, like what Marvel Snap has done to card games, I consider incredibly impressive. But there are downsides that come with it. And those downsides are basically every card is also kind of a removal spell. Like, not literally, but in terms of invalidating your opponent's investment, you can think about them that way and it wouldn't be too far off. And that can mean that, like, okay, you both did your thing, their thing was bigger, and you just feel like your thing didn't actually matter.
Yep, I totally get that. I think you can be reductive about almost every game that has ever existed. And you can find scenarios where the things you did not matter all that much. The reality is, I think a game should be judged by when the things you do matter, and how good that feels, because there's always scenarios where just like you actually get right down to it and you're like, "Oh, we just kind of compared numbers for a little bit." That's every game. Every game can be simplified to we compared numbers for a little bit. You have to really understand when you break from that paradigm and how satisfying it feels to be able to do so.
Here we have Mercury, a card that I have so much flair on, and this genuinely isn't a hint as to how good it is. I have a lot of flair on a lot of cards that you can barely read the text. Mercury can move once. Ongoing enemy cards here can't move.
Feels niche. Like, I think being able to move once is probably the more enticing part of this to me, but enemy cards in a lane not being able to move, unless mobility has dramatically expanded in my time away, I would feel like this is very good against some very specific strategies, and then not this just always played super powerful utility card. Although that free movement is pretty attractive. Like, I certainly like that a bunch. And maybe that's enough to kind of keep its place as a hedge against move being present in the metagame. But I don't see slam dunk potential here immediately.
I think you have the correct analysis of this card, and this is my way of just sneaking a win in, because move is arguably the best deck, which makes this card really good. And so, like, obviously, if I told you that, you would have figured that out. So I didn't tell you that. So I got to, like, kind of count this one as at least half a win for me. But your analysis of the card is basically spot on, which is it is extremely good against stuff that it is actually good against. And move is a very good deck right now. I think many people would agree it would be the best deck. Or is the best deck even in a world where this exists. And two, this is just an attractive enough card. Not the most attractive card, but attractive enough that it's like, all right, a 3/4 that moves, whatever, it's fine. Because it also says I'm the only card that's this good in the matchup that actually matters. And its fallback is like good enough effectively to exist.
Yeah. That kind of incidental hate you get, just a valuable card, but not a linchpin of any strategy. I get it. I get this one, I think, on its face.
There was a period of time where it was the linchpin of a strategy because of like a very specific wording of another card where it's like it moves your opponent's cards, but if it can't move, which is supposed to be because all their lanes are full, but Mercury shortcuts that. If it can't move, it gets destroyed. So you just play those two cards and you just like blow up whatever their biggest guy is. That is the other thing that this does, but that feels even more unfair to be like, oh yeah, I'm gonna dock you for that. I'm not even gonna consider doing such a thing. That is just not
I appreciate that. I knew I was coming into a fair arena when I signed up for this.
Yeah. I mean, I think the problem is you're managing to do such a good job when it's clear that you're at a disadvantage in this that I come off looking like a jerk. And so that's the issue that I have, I feel.
Bro, it's only a matter of time till I start just flubbing these all over the place. I promise you it's coming.
Okay, I believe you. That's extremely believable and a thing I will extremely expect. I would put the over-under on flubs at 0.5. That's where I'm
Okay.
at. The Fallen One is a relatively new card, 5/5 on reveal. Set your max energy equal to this card's power.
Hmm. Can How much can you explain about what that means without giving this card away? I just feel like it's been a little bit too
Sure,
long.
yeah,
So
I can
my
explain it.
assumption would be, I play this on turn 5, let's say in its simplest state, and that means for the rest of the game, I'm going up. Well, let's say I'm able to play this on turn 3 for some reason,
Sure.
and I do so, and then my max energy is set to 5. Is it still ticking
It
up
is still
every
ticking up,
turn?
yes.
Okay.
So it sets to 5, and then the turn happens, and you get the 6, right? So it is not going to be a downside to play this on 5. You will still have your normal 6 on 6 if you are unable to do what this card is asking of you and make it bigger.
Yeah. Yeah. This feels like it's pushing up against the limits of the game system. Usually, if you make a card like this, you do so with caution. But obviously, the first thing I see is like, can I play this on, say, turn 3, turn 4, get ahead of curve, find a spot to play 2 units on 1 turn? That seems pretty plausible to me. The second one is the increased power scenario where I get to play like double 6 as I get to the end of the game. If something like that is possible, that feels like, uh, again, meta defining stuff, like you build whole decks around it and try and accomplish it. I don't know how efficient the pumps are. I don't know how efficient the ramp is. I'm going to say this card is very good anyway and take my lumps if I'm wrong.
Yeah, I mean, it's not necessarily an issue of efficiency of pump or an efficiency of ramps. It's an issue of the payoff that you would get for having like 12 energy just kind of isn't worth the squeeze. Where it's like, yeah, I can play
Mm,
2 6s. Who cares? My opponent is doubling their stuff. Like that's the biggest issue you run into is like I'll play 2 statically large men and they're playing exponential men. And
yeah.
that's the thing you run into is like Marvel Snap. The one thing I think I could tell you since you last did this is it's become a lot more synergy centric, where if you're
Okay.
just playing dudes, you need things to hold back the synergies. And if you're just playing dudes, this is the most just playing dudes deck of all time. This is the most just playing dudes card of all time. It is just like, here's some guys that let me have a million energy. I use that million energy to play guys that are pretty good on rate. And the lack of like ability to build for a meta game is largely the thing that happens here because it ends up positioning itself as one of the synergy decks. But weirdly, its output is more limited by being a ramp deck than you would expect.
So you can't find like double 6s to go exponential, basically. You're
That's
better
the
off
issue.
serving 2s, 3s, and 4s. So, okay, I'm going to now, after I know this, I'll take this as an L. That's fine.
Oh, it
But
is.
what I will say is that I feel like should some 6s in the future
Mhm.
combine in exponential ways, then maybe this gets revisited down the line. It feels weird to me if this is a card that is never good. I guess that's what I'll say about it.
I think that's basically true. They just made a 5 that does like some vaguely exponential things that I've seen good players playing around with this guy and that 5 and like some of the spaces like it is much more a payoff issue than it is that like this stuff is fundamentally bad. I don't think this stuff is fundamentally bad. It's a little bit predictable, a little bit straightforward, and surprisingly disruptible for what it is. Because you'd think, like,
Mm,
oh, buffing my stuff isn't that disruptible, but like the best things you can do, like to curve 4 into this, are actually kind of disruptible. Like you can deal with like the best 4 into this kind of stuff a bit more easily than you'd think. And so you have this card that's like, I do think it has potential, but it's a little bit too disruptible in the setup and it doesn't have enough of the juice on the payoff. And if either of those two things change, I think the card could get significantly better. Shang-Chi. This guy has changed. I'm not sure if I showed you him last time. He used to destroy everything with 10 or more power. Now it's just one card with 10 or more power. Otherwise, his stats are the same. What do you think about our boy?
Yeah, so context of the last card, if it is about making power exponential, it really depends whether making power exponential is done across your
Yeah.
units or if it's about making one unit very big. Surely there has to be some strategy that makes one unit very big. I suspect this sees reasonable amounts of play and it just kind of shifts around based on what the format is about at the moment, but probably doesn't leave the metagame all that often.
In and out, right? What's weird about Shang-Chi, and this is something I actually just wanted to get your perspective on as a designer, is the amount of times that it would be meaningfully worse to play this version of Shang-Chi compared to the previous version of Shang-Chi, which destroyed all 10 pluses, right? Not a large percentage of what this card is. And yet, when they made that change, it almost entirely disappeared from being a metagame staple to not being a metagame staple. And there are good reasons and bad reasons for that. Like reasons that I think are well thought out and well reasoned. Like there are other cards that can do what it does in the current context of the metagame, maybe a little bit more efficiently because they're specifically good against the things that are getting to that size in a way that in a way that this card is more generic, right? And so as such, being more generic is like a little bit less efficient. And so that's a good reason. And then there's the idea that like maybe the reason this is happening is a bad reason, which is that, you know, everyone was just playing this guy way too much for like 6 months, which is probably true also. And I'm kind of just wanting to get your perspective as like someone who manages a game. What is it that you would do if you're like, all right, I'm looking at the top level data here and I can tell this card is not that good, but everyone complains about it. What would your approach to that situation be?
This sounds like my life on a near daily basis. So it's very complicated. Like I don't want to I don't, like as a game designer, I feel bad spending my time here putting over game designers nonstop. But I think like our job is near impossible a lot of the times. And it mostly comes down to the people who engage with your games want very, very different things from them. There is no monolith to deal with. It's just a million voices. And if you do A, 50% of them will hate you. If you do B, the other 50% will hate you. So you're not coming out ahead in this scenario. Like you just got to figure out where to take your L and do it in the best interest of your game. So when you're making alterations, a lot of the time you are doing it for perception, for relief from sentiment. And I don't think that's inherently bad. Like certainly you can put criticisms and I've been guilty of this myself in the past where you overreact to public sentiment or you mistake something as widespread sentiment that is just niche and you know maybe more prominent voices in your community have taken on a certain sentiment and are kind of leading the charge. Some things just kind of catch fire via social media and get hyped up. So if Shang-Chi had become this specter that had loomed over Marvel Snap and people are sick of it and they don't want to see it anymore, and you just think there's a window where you can preserve like 90% of the effectiveness, but you know it's going to give some relief to that perception, you probably do it. Like I don't see a lot of risk as the designer in making that kind of shift because you're kind of trying to get your cake and eat it too there. What you might end up with is like, you know, the worst of both worlds in some scenarios where it still does the same thing, so everyone's still upset about it, and now you have, I don't know, pissed off the people who have, I guess in Marvel Snap's case, like invested into variants or whatever, and just blunted this card to nothingness. So again, all no-win scenarios, but I can totally see why you would take an approach that still, you know, leaves the card doing the same stuff and maybe even at the same effectiveness, just tones it down a little bit.
I've frankly been a little bit shocked. Like, this is a change that matters in, I would guess, 5% of games that involve this card. And it has dropped from like you described it as a specter hanging over Marvel Snap. That's what it was. And it fundamentally is not that anymore. And in the context, or in using the framing that you provided here, I don't think it's reasonable to call this change anything other than a massive success. Like,
Yeah, I
they nailed
agree.
it,
You describing it
apparently.
that way was the first thing that comes to mind. It's like you got the result you wanted. You
Yeah.
left this important strategic element of your game behind. You just kind of like release that pressure valve a little bit. And sometimes you have to do that with your community.
Yeah, it is remarkable because a lot of Marvel Snap's recent balance has been toning down the cards that stop you from doing things, right? Just like things that are generally or were previously regarded as like fairly important floodgates or release valves for powerful things. What they realized was like, honestly, we could probably make these a little bit weaker and they would still be floodgating. They would still be release
Mhm.
valving when those things happened. And I'm a competitive player, right? When like sort of got the sense that that's what they were doing, my first instinct was this is a terrible idea. You know, like you can't do that. Those are really important. And then they kept doing it, and it kept working. And I was just like, oh, I don't know anything about this. Apparently, like they just kept pulling it off every single time, and every single time the metagame got not less engaging, but more engaging because now you're actually making a meaningful sacrifice if you want to play the card that wins the matchup. Like you're doing things now. And so like I've done plenty of mea culpas. I'll continue doing them. But like this is one of those cases where I was like, I don't think you can get rid of this guy. I think he's too important. And I was just dead wrong. Absolutely dead wrong. And that's like you talked about people in your community pushing things. And like I was people, I feel.
Yep. Well, look, there is if this was easy to figure out and we never got anything wrong, wouldn't be a very interesting game. Like that's just the bottom line. It needs to be somewhat hard to understand exactly how these ripple effects are going to play out. And it wouldn't shock me too if the scenario you're describing where the game becomes low interaction and, less satisfying to play under those kind of conditions. It wouldn't shock me if that happens. It wouldn't shock me if you are eventually right. And a lot of times, as the game designers, our job is to just shift along this spectrum and try to do so smoothly. You don't want to go from here to here. That can be violent and jarring, and people generally won't respond to that. But you do want to just kind of slowly move back and forth and then realize, oh, we've gone too far. And then it's coming back down this, and you're just floating back and forth because there is no this point. There is no center of the screen that leaves everyone happy. It is not actually an achievable outcome. So once you understand that, then you start to get this different vision where you're just trying to move things along.
Zombie Captain Marvel, a 4/4 with, honestly, this is one of my favorite variants of all time. Activate, destroy your other cards here to get +3 power for each. Move to a location you're losing. Activate. It's tap. like you do it once a game. It's tap, but once a game. That's what's going on here. Like it's you literally you hold down on the card and it does the thing, but it can't do it the turn you play it because the turn you play it, it's face down and revealing.
That was my next question. Okay, so if I were to play this on 6, I do not get to activate it. It has to be revealed on 5 if that's when I want to do it.
Correct.
Man, move to a location you're losing. Back in my day, that would have been extremely powerful. Also, the ability to turn fodder into +3, so like just 3 garbage units in a lane that like opponent has to respect a little bit. They have to put something there, and maybe there's some upside for destroying them. I am talking myself into this card more and more. The cards have gotten strange. The fact that there's zombie variants as well.
Well,
An interesting
they did a
development.
zombie season most recently because they did, the Marvel Zombies thing. It's
Yeah,
Halloween.
yeah,
So
yeah.
this is like a
Yeah.
pretty recent card for them. This one came out in the
Okay.
October season. So like
Okay.
the fact that they're doing the zombie stuff, it's not like, oh, we're out of ideas. It's like this is a cool Halloween thing to do. I think.
Cool. I'm going to say this card is good. If I take an L here, I feel like the thing I may not be accounting for enough is the tight window for activation. Like there's just not a lot of time to actually go ahead and set this up and get the activation off. Maybe it's a little too face up too. Like the fact that this has to be revealed and now opponent knows I can go ahead and see the location I'm losing a little bit. You can play around it, but I don't know enough to know what the play around would look like. So I am just going to go with powerful card, mostly based on the move to a location you're losing text.
Okay, so there are two things here that I think when I tell you them, you'll be like, oh, okay? First thing here, she doesn't move to a location you're losing at the end of the game. She moves on the turn that you activate her.
When you activate.
So it's not like
so
she
if you
gets...
activate on 6 though, isn't it equivalent, or it checks like before any reveals?
What it does
Okay,
is
much worse than I
you
thought.
can order this, right? But remember, like the way Marvel Snap works, your cards, if you're winning the game, reveal first and activate first. So she might move to a location that you're losing, and then they play stuff there. Like you're only losing it because, or then they don't play stuff there, right? Like the priority implications of when this card moves matter a lot, right? The second thing is, and you did get this one right, which was 4 activate, really small window for this to actually be a card. There are effectively 2 turns of the game where this is a card you can play. And every other turn of the game, you either don't have enough energy or you cannot play it. So this is a card that I was actually, one of the cards really, like, it came out and I was like, I think this card could be pretty good. But the 4 activate combined with the, if this card just said at the end of the game, I'll move to a location you're losing, that would be a very different thing. But it doesn't
was
say
that the text on
Yes.
Captain Marvel? Okay, I think
That
I was like
was.
shortcutting this
Yep.
card to Captain Marvel in my head, and now I understand a pretty substantial difference here.
If it did do that, and I don't know, like, I would imagine if it did do that, this would be a pretty broken card. Like that is sort of where my head is. Like, I don't think I can knock you for that, because if that's how you're reading it, yeah, I would say this card's probably pretty busted. Like, yeah, it's like a really, really strong card, I would imagine. But yeah, like largely it gets run into timing issues of making sure you actually play it and it actually does something, and making sure that you play it in such a way that it is actually as close to a Captain Marvel effect as it can be, because it doesn't say move to a location you're losing that would win you the game either. It just moves to a location you're losing. It could go to the wrong location you're losing. If you need it to go to one of them and he goes to the other one, that could totally happen. So it's a really interesting card that I think, if they were bold enough to put actual Captain Marvel text on, could be a really good card. But since they did this sort of half and half thing, it ends up being about half as good.
How about it's a sacrifice outlet, like just having this on-demand way to go ahead and clear smaller things? How good has that been, or is that just like there's better ways to do that at this point?
It's the second one. There's just a lot of
Yeah.
cheaper ways to do it that like do it on reveal instead of like being on board and having this limited window, right? You generally would prefer the ones that like are either A, cheaper, or B, have some other additional payoff attached to them for doing such a thing. Like there's a card that's a 4/8 that's like kill your on reveals here, repeat their on reveals, right? And so if you're doing like sacrifice outlet stuff, like I'm going to get my ETB and then I'm going to double the ETB, right? Like that's kind of what you're doing in that space if you're looking for sack outlets, rather than this, which is power and cool, but it's not as like meaningful to what I guess you'd describe as an aristocrat's game plan.
Yeah. Okay. It's a cool card. I think it's really
Super
well
cool.
designed. Yeah.
Super cool. Cerebro 3/0. Your highest power cards all have +3 power.
Well, this card existed
It
a long
did.
time ago. I don't feel like its text was different.
It
Like
was.
I remember doing
There is a
I remember
very
doing
important
something like
difference.
this.
There is a very important difference in this text.
Okay.
It used to say 2. It says 3 now.
Oh,
How
well,
important
that
is that difference, though? That's the
seems like it's
question.
better. So I'm assuming
Incredible.
if you build your Cerebro deck, you are mostly trying to make sure all of your things have the same power. I also assume that's maybe easy to mess up for your opponent, like not that hard if you know you have to account for Cerebro to go ahead and alter them in some way, either with a minus effect or even a plus effect at that point. Seems like it can be pretty backbreaking. I think even back when I was playing, Cerebro felt kind of capped. Like it was hard to get a load of value out of it. And it wasn't so much that it was 2 versus 3. It was just that even when you line things up, you were kind of playing what I would describe as mid-rangey. You weren't really a full combo deck, and you still couldn't get the disruption you wanted because you were so focused around this concept of all my stuff has the same power. Now, if there is a particular run of cards that is, you know, again, leaning into that mid-range idea where they play disruption fairly well and they all happen to have the same power. So you're also getting this disruptive stuff and maybe there's new activate stuff. I could see a world for Cerebro, but I'm going to say this card is not very good right now.
It actually went the other way, where instead of getting interactive tools, what it got was a bunch of cards that copy Cerebro. So now it is a combo deck. Like,
so it is just piling Cerebros on something.
Instead of getting like interactive tools to be a big mid-range deck, what it got is I'm just gonna play like 3 or 4 copies of this effect. So it's like you still are losing to like, you know, oh, the location that gives me a 10 power guy popped up, I instantly die, right? Like that still happens, right? But I mean, I think this is a name you're familiar with. You know, Mani Davudi Zapgaze?
Yep.
Yeah, he just won. Marvel Snap did like a golden, like a tournament series that led up to a world championship. He just won it with Cerebro. And that is like, I still wouldn't necessarily describe the deck as incredibly good, but I was the person who was like, you should play Cerebro in this tournament. He was the only person who played the Cerebro list, like, because Cerebro lists are defined by numbers, like Cerebro 2, Cerebro 3, Cerebro 4. It's the number that you're trying to get all your cards to have the power of. He was the only person who played Cerebro 3 in the tournament. And I think that largely the thing that this deck does well is it is extremely overpoweringly good at having a bunch of power and not actually being interactable with in a meaningful way. There are cards.
Well, how many Cerebros do you end up with in your end state?
Usually the answer is 2. Just Cerebro Mystique, but both are buffed to 3 power. That'll do it, right? Just full lanes of 9s will do it. But you can get significantly more than that. There are cards that will give you up to 4, depending on how you actually want to set that up. It ends up being kind of overkill to go for that, though, because what really matters is being bigger than the average mid-range deck. Because their whole decks, their whole premise of like an example is like we talked about the Fallen One decks, right? You're going to combo out, you're going to do your Fallen One thing, and then your final turn is going to be a guy that has 14 power, and then like another guy that has 14 power or whatever, right? Like 2 big 6s, yeah? When you play a Cerebro and you've played 3s the entire game, that's more than 14 power. And you're not jumping through the same level of hoops. What you're doing is fundamentally outpowering a lot of this stuff. Like, hey, look, here's my lane of all 3s. They're actually all 9. Can you beat 36? And for a lot of those mid-range decks, the answer is just no, I can't. I lose to 2 lanes of 36. And those breakpoints are like pretty important because it's pretty easy to get a bunch of Cerebros, but also expose yourself to counterplay. But if you do the exact right number of Cerebros and don't expose yourself to counterplay, you just farm. And that's sort of where the deck exists right now. It's obviously still a little inconsistent, location dependent. There are bad things that can happen to you, but it is a very relevant deck in terms of being a powerful ceiling deck that is shockingly difficult to interact with.
I want to ask a question. It might be hard for you to answer.
Okay.
So the last time I recall playing a bunch of Snap, it was like it's going to be hard to give exact context because these cards all still exist and things change. But I remember Thanos being very good and playing with Infinity Stones, and that was like the best deck. Maybe right before that, it was like Wong based was the last best deck I remember. Where you were just doubling things, I believe, all the time.
Are you talking about Shuri? Because I could pinpoint the meta you're talking about if you mean Shuri.
I don't remember that card, honestly.
Shuri said double the power of the next card you play. So that's kind of why I'm thinking you might have meant that. Because also it had Wong's stats at 4-2.
What did Wong do?
Wong doubled your on reveal abilities.
Okay. Yeah, maybe it was Shuri. You might be right.
So you're talking like I would guess just ballparking here, April 2023. That's pretty much about the time that those were the decks.
Probably. But my point is, as I remember numbers at that time, numbers were kind of ridiculous. Like I remember lanes having 50, 60 power at some points. Am I just misremembering, or have the actual numbers that go into lanes come down a little bit, possibly?
I think partly you might be remembering old Blob, which was a
Okay.
heinously stupid card that did kind of
This
get to 50 power a lot of the time.
possible.
I
Yep.
think that is the a thought which would also put this at like December 2023 maybe. But
Okay.
that was a card that released that just ate your entire deck, and so Thanos would play it because it had a bigger deck. It would eat the entire deck, and it would just get to like absurdly heinous levels of power. There are no sixes that are anywhere close to that at this point. So I think what I would say happened is because back in the Shuri Red Skull days, it was like that would be like 28, right? Like
Yeah, I
that's the
remember
number that
Red
we're
Skull.
doing, right? Shuri
Okay.
Red Skull is like 28 or whatever. It never got that much bigger than 30-ish. And then it contracted pretty reasonably as we get into like sort of more tech focused metagames where you try to do this stuff like, okay, nice Shuri Red Skull, I'm going to Shang-Chi it. I don't really care, right?
Yep.
The thing about Cerebro is it doesn't actually die to any of that stuff.
Mm,
Like, you don't get Shang-Chi because your guys are 9. Or it just doesn't happen, right? You don't get Shadow King. That doesn't work on what Cerebro's doing. You don't even get Enchantress because you don't have priority and you play your Cerebro on the final turn of the game. So there's no time or possibility for them to interact with you unless you set it up earlier so you can get double effects on it, right? That's largely the advantage that Cerebro has, is that basically it gets to manipulate the priority system such that it spends the entire game setting this thing up such that you can't really interact with the card that actually matters.
okay.
I do think that you're misremembering by a bit. Not necessarily like if you are thinking of like Blob and Thanos decks, I don't think your numbers are that far off. That guy would get up to 30, 40. Like that guy was a very heinously too strong card. But
Yep.
I would say they probably learned from that.
I'm fully going to concede. I could be misremembering. First of all, I'm 43 years old, and it's all fading very quickly. Like I just won't be here for much longer mentally. I know that, and I've done so much other gaming in the interim that keeping all these numbers straight is a next to impossible goal for me. So fully concede that point. And yeah, that was useful context. I think maybe the thing that could have pushed me to
Mm.
giving this like, yeah, this sounds pretty good analysis would have been conceptualizing nines as a breakpoint, because you said that and I was like, oh, that makes a lot of sense. If there's this Shang-Chi
Well,
destroy tens very easily.
people don't even play him anymore. It's less about like Shang-Chi, like that matters, obviously, but it's also like the card people play a lot of is a card called Shadow King, which takes away
Mhm.
all of the like additional green power, right? Like Deadpool, when he doubles, that's green power. It shows up as green, right? Shadow King
Yep.
takes that away. So obviously Shadow King is pretty good against Deadpool and things that say I double my stuff, right? So he's really popular. He does absolutely nothing to Cerebro.
Doesn't apply to ongoing
Zero.
buffs.
Yeah, like
Basically. Yeah.
absolutely zero to like what Cerebro is really good about is like if you are trying to interact with me, it probably doesn't work. And in the event that you have a card that does work, there are multiple cards in my deck that say actually that doesn't work. Like
Mhm.
it is if locations didn't randomly blow this deck up, I would call it the best deck in the game. Unfortunately, they do, so it isn't. But it is still a real force. Terrax the Tamer, 3/4 on reveal. For each location, shuffle a rock into the losing player's deck. Whoever's winning the locations, they don't get a rock. Whoever's losing the locations, they do.
Man, drawing rocks sucks. I remember this from back in the day very clearly. You
Oh.
do not want to draw rocks for each location. What if there's a reason you want rocks? That is frightening me.
I will tell you right now, there is not a reason you want rocks.
Okay. What if I did this a few times? Like, my first thought was, okay, just shuffling in, like, I don't know. First of all, I have to be winning the game. Second of all, I'm probably not winning all 3 locations with firm regularity as I get to turn 3. I'm sure I could build my deck in that fashion where I was, like, hyper aggro, almost zoo-like. Like, I could see the appeal in a zoo-type deck, but this gets more interesting if I'm able to maybe double this effect, like, do it twice. Now I'm starting to feel like I've messed up my opponent a little bit. Um, but man, just goes against all the context I've picked up so far. Like, this is not exponential. This is not completely warping. I I see a home for it in a zoo-like strategy. I have no idea if a zoo-like strategy could be viable any longer. So I'm going to go with this is weak. And I feel like I'm just on a losing streak now, and I'm tumbling into oblivion further and further.
I'm not sure how I would describe this because it's a staple card in exactly one deck, but that deck isn't like a great deck, right?
Okay.
This is you're not really built to double it per se. It is getting doubled in that there is a card that scales on the amount of cards in your opponent's deck. So it sort of scales on I
Okay.
put rocks in there, right? Like, so this guy is really important to that strategy. And to be clear, literally nothing else. So that is also important. The reason I put him on here was because I thought I could trip you up with priority. Because part of your analysis was, well, I'm not going to be able to do this with much regularity. But again, the way the priority system in Marvel Snap works and the way reveals work, we talked about
You
this with
reveal
Zombie Captain
first.
Marvel. If you're winning, you reveal first. They have a face down card there. It doesn't matter. You have the 4 there that this guy is, right? So he's actually, if you're ahead, pretty much getting at least 2 to 1, sometimes all 3, depending on how the game has set up. And like, that is the thing I was thinking I would trip you up on. I don't think I was enough to meaningfully make you wrong though. Like, and I
Yeah,
regret that choice at this point.
that is the problem is, like, first of all, I didn't contemplate that. So that does make it a little bit more reasonable to achieve with regularity, but I just couldn't see how that was enough in
Yeah.
a world where the game has gotten more powerful to, like, bricking 1 to 2 draws out, like, at its ceiling just doesn't seem like it's going to be outcome determinative enough of the time. And it is also asking you to play in a very, very specific fashion across those first 2 turns. So the reward really does have to be there. That's why I was kind of thinking small ball, but it doesn't seem like small ball is going to work right now. So
I wish it did. Like, you know the kind of card game player I am. I wish there was something where it's like I rush out ahead and I do enough disruptive thanks to that your combo doesn't work, right? I think that there are certain combos that this would be better against, but Marvel Snap sort of fundamentally puts you in a situation where if you have disruption and you don't know if it actually worked, you might have to leave in case it didn't. And so the
mm,
snapping and retreating thing really plays into this stuff. One of the things about these rock decks is a lot of the time, if you actually sit down and do the math, you're just supposed to stay in every situation where they're not giving you a clear signal to leave. And I like doing that because I'm a streamer and I love cope staying, but it does make it a lot harder to actually get the other side of value out of this, right? Like,
mm.
oh, well, if I snap on the rocks and they don't have their stuff, they're going to leave. If I snap on the rocks and they do have their stuff, I'm going to lose because my rocks didn't stop them from having their stuff. And so, like, that's the thing the rocks decks runs into a lot of the time.
Yeah, I could totally see that. Makes a lot of sense.
Probably the meanest card to put on here because this is text that is so incredibly Marvel Snap specific that I don't know you could come up with an analogy for it in any other game. Super Giant, 4/6 on reveal. All cards played next turn don't reveal until the game ends.
So symmetrical,
Yep.
myself and my opponent, but I have built my deck in such a way that I don't care what my opponent's doing, and they need information to account for what I'm doing. Seems good. All cards played next turn. The other thing is I can stack reveal abilities. So if I want things to happen in the same kind of priority window that normally could not happen because of costing. This seems good. So I get like my 5 into double 3 or 5 into 6 on the same turn. I'm trying to think if this creates a feedback loop where like I know this is in the metagame, so I'm just supposed to play this myself. I don't know that I immediately see that. And it's sort of weird that I can just get this from my opponent as well. And there's almost like a prisoner's dilemma element to it if I've got all the timings right in my head. Like, is there upside for me to be the one who plays Super Giant versus my opponent being the one who plays
No,
Super Giant?
there is no
If I was
that the order of revealing at the end of the game is who had priority on turn 6.
right,
So there's no
right.
like, oh, I played Super Giant and I hid my stuff from their Super Giant stuff or whatever. Like that's not a thing that is built into the game mechanics of priority already.
So what is the Super Giant mirror? Does just nobody want to play Super Giant? That's very strange. Uh Man, I am struggling with this one. This one's tough. It's an intriguing card. I'm going to take a guess for purposes of moving the show along, but I feel like I could sit and think about this for quite a bit longer.
It's probably
I'm
the hardest
going
card I could possibly give you if I
I'm
had to
going to
guess.
say it's very good, and I hope I got my reasoning about right. I'm like even deception, like if I have access to this and again, I have built around this. Like, I'm not trying to be reactive in this state. I'm trying to be the one you are supposed to answer. And if I make it very, very hard to answer, I feel like things can go in my favor. I'm going with good. This card is tough.
It is a good card and it is a tough card. This is a card that is used to do tricky things. Largely, there are two things that this card does that are important to grasp, I would say. The first thing is it shortcuts past decks that abuse priority to make sure that you can't interact with their stuff. So a deck that, say, is bouncing all of its cards to replay them on the final turn of the game under the theory that all the cards that would normally beat something like that need to actually see the card, and those cards will be face down, so they will not get affected by whatever it is your opponent is trying to do to interact. This shortcuts past that by
Mm.
saying, my interactive piece reveals at the end of the game. So
Yeah,
there's no way
you
to dodge me
steal
there.
the last window with this
Yes.
card. Yeah,
The other
okay.
thing this card does is allow you to disrupt setup on 5, which is like there are decks where it's like my 5 is my important card. The text on my 5 sets up my 6. The text on my 5 is my turn 6 a lot of the time, right? And there are degrees to which this is or is not true, but there are a lot of decks that are like, I have a really deterministic, like this is the best possible turn 5, and it's the best possible turn 5 because of what it allows on turn 6. And Super Giant disrupts that by nature. Largely, Super Giant decks are sort of tricky mid-rangey stuff where there's a lot of intricate, like, and weird applications of cards that you wouldn't necessarily be playing in a mid-range deck that wasn't doing this kind of window stealing thing. They are notably, because of that, they have a tendency to get lost in the sauce a little bit,
Mm.
where like a Super Giant deck has all of these tricks in it, and then it just runs up against, Magic analogy, like Valakut the Molten Pinnacle, and it's like, oh, I died. They just have more
Mhm.
numbers than me. I don't do anything here. Like, they played Primeval Titan, I lose. There is a very limited amount of points in interaction that can go in the stack. And you have to use all of them really, really well to actually play this deck well. This is the kind of deck that has like a couple of one tricks at high levels that are just really scary to play against, but doesn't percolate downwards in a meaningful way almost ever, despite being like, there's some really good stuff going on here. It's a really interesting card, one of the coolest ones that they've done, and the sort of priority implications of it make it just by definition not a card that is workable for casual players a lot of the time.
Does it do any of the combining on reveal stuff that I
It When it
theorized?
first came out, people would try to do stuff like that with it. It
Yeah.
is rarely about that
Mhm.
because the specifics of it are like really specific, and if you want to do that, you probably just do Invisible Woman, which is a 2-cost card that says your cards reveal at the end of the game here. So if you wanted to combine on reveals and make your 5 and 6 show up in the same window, just chuck them under an Invisible Woman. She's much better at actually making that happen because she's asymmetrical. She just happens to your stuff, and that you're just very much happier with that. Largely that kind of stuff, though, like when it is face down, is vulnerable to, like, you know, the stuff that says your opponent's cards that reveal here don't have text, or your opponent's cards that reveal here don't have on reveals or whatever. So that kind of like 1A, 1B setup tends to be a little bit too straightforward to stick around in a metagame, where Supergiant herself with these sort of mid-rangey setups is just so tricky and so weird and so hard to play against and so naturally disruptive that she ends up being a relevant deck.
Going to ask another question, which at first blush won't seem very related to Supergiant. Do you know on average how many new Marvel Snap cards there are per year?
On average per year, I would guess about 120.
Okay. I'm just so impressed by Marvel Snap card design. I feel like they get so much from their game system, and some of that is they get to make fewer cards than a lot of other card games. Like, that certainly helps a lot, but 120 is still a decent number of cards per year, and it seems like they are continuing to get more and more design space. Like, they keep finding new areas to mine, and I haven't seen it done, at least in the cards you've shown me. Like, there could certainly be exceptions to this. I haven't seen it done in an ugly or an elegant way. I will say I don't know anything about Supergiant, who this character is, if they're still capturing flavor of their cards that efficiently. But in terms of just gameplay mechanics, I find this stuff very, very impressive.
I actually do know who she is. She's one of Thanos's Black Order. She didn't show up in the movies, but she's one of, like, you know, the Ebony Maw and like the big guy that the Hulk fought at the beginning of Infinity War and all that. She's one of those guys.
I didn't see any of those movies, bro. Like,
well, she's one of
going
those
along with my no
Okay.
time thing.
Sure.
I am completely disengaged from pop culture, and I used to love comic books. I just don't have the space anymore.
I when I first started doing Marvel Snap stuff, I was like, well, the IP is actually a negative to me because my familiarity with it was from the MCU, which, I mean, I think we all know that that is, like, I would call it middlebrow at best, you know, popcorn flicks, right? And as I've gotten into comics, my opinion of I got into comics through Snap, and my opinion of the MCU has only gotten lower. Because, like, I'll read the comic and I'll be like, oh wait, this is what they were trying to do. I'll be like,
much better execution.
Yeah, like, wait, what? Like, I read Devil's Reign, which is the one where, like, there's this long overarching storyline of Fisk becoming mayor of New York, right? And they're doing that in the Daredevil show. And I read Devil's Reign and I watched the Daredevil show, and I'm just like, how did you get from here to there? Like, how did you take this source material and turn it into this? I don't like it. I don't like what you've done here. And like that happens more than you'd think. It really does.
As a comic book fan for many years, comic book movies came such a long way, and then they went too far down that. They just kept going. They came from the absolute bottom, and then they just amplified to this thing that was, like, supposed to be the cultural touchstone moment all the time, and they were just chasing that over and over, and it became very repetitive to me. And you know, I dreamed when I was a kid and just obsessed with comic books. I would dream of there being movies of this caliber being made, and everyone in the world heralding their arrival and being excited about it. And then it became a nightmare somewhere along the line.
So here's a complex one. You talk about design space. This guy might be the most design spacey card they've ever done. So the way Dormammu works is you start your game with this summoning ritual in hand. Each summoning ritual, when you complete it, gives you the next summoning ritual. So we're going to go through these real quick. Summoning ritual number 1, 0 cost, merge your highest power destroyed card into Dormammu to continue.
So this starts, I just want to make sure I get it right. This starts in my hand as the game begins.
Correct.
I can play so like, this doesn't destroy something. I need to destroy something of my own volition, and then I can play summoning ritual. Okay.
That is correct, yes.
Okay.
And if you do not have a destroyed card, it will fizzle. It will not give you the next ritual.
Got it. Got it.
Number 2 costs 1. Dormammu steals 1 power from each card here to continue the ritual. And number 3 costs 2. Destroy 2 of your characters here to summon Dormammu, who otherwise would cost 7.
I can draw this.
Yes,
Just
you
a
can draw
card?
this. You can draw the
Okay.
card. It will summon from your hand or your deck, though. Like, it's not like you draw it and the whole thing doesn't work.
Yep. Can we go back to step 2, possibly?
Sure.
So this is every card, not only your cards.
Yes, your opponent's cards and your cards at the location that you play this.
And then step 3 one more time.
This one is your cards.
This is a lot of squeeze for a 12 power thing. I'm kind of like looking for the upside in the summoning rituals, like we talked about. Destroy outlets. That first one not having its own outlet means it can't function as my first destroy, but if I achieve that, I will guarantee I get my second 2 destroys. So things like Deadpool could benefit from that.
Important
reset
note
it?
here. This is important. It's got to actually be dead. Deadpool isn't a destroyed card. He goes back to your hand. So it doesn't work with Deadpool.
Okay. I'm going not worth it. I'm going, you want this to be good, and people have tried very hard to make this a thing, and I'm sure there's lots of deck building around it, but I just am not seeing the output. If there's some other benefit to destroying a bunch of stuff, maybe there is like the sacrifice archetype around this, and this actually plays above curve, but it does feel like a lot of work right now.
That's largely the issue. It's like the fact that you looked at this card and you were like, all right, well, okay, I get 12, right? Like, what am I, is it actually that much better to be like, technically I get this 12 for 3 energy, but that's not really what's happening. It's not really a 312. It's a 312 that I had to jump through a million hoops to get, right? And my pitch for this card has basically always been they should just make it 20 power. Like, that's sort of just been my pitch for this card for forever. Is like, right now he's 12 power, and that doesn't matter because the hoops you're jumping through are, I wouldn't say they're necessarily worse than paying energy, but the fact that you identified the biggest hoop, which is you got to have something that's died. That's the biggest hoop for this guy, is getting that first destroy into the graveyard when so many cards that get destroyed for value do not actually die. Because it's not just Deadpool. Wolverine, you destroy him for value? No, he doesn't actually go to the graveyard.
Back.
He's alive, right? X-23, destroy for value? No, doesn't actually happen. Sabretooth, destroy for value? No, it doesn't actually happen. And so this guy is sort of forcing his own lane in an archetype that already has a lot of cards that you'd think would work with it, but can't because of that wording on the first spell. So, I mean, maybe he doesn't need to be 20 power. Maybe they just need to work on that first spell. But as long as the first spell is what it is, he probably needs to be 20 power to make me want to do it.
Yeah, a scenario where you were like rocking yourself all the time and it's supposed to be a downside, and this like resets that downside is also intriguing, but it does just feel like it's about the support cards and build up enough support cards, or you have to make the quest worth it and you just dump a bunch of power into this. But I don't think either of those outcomes, of those 2 outcomes, the support cards is going to be the more fulfilling one. I think if you're just dumping a bunch of power onto this, it's not going to feel all that meaningful when you are like, here's my number. What are you going to do about it?
My worst instinct as a game designer is being a hack, right? Like, in as much as I have engaged with this, my worst instincts as a game designer, and I don't think they're wrong. Like, I don't want to sell myself out on this, right? Because I think they'd work, but it's not long-term thinking, right? It's like, what do we do to take the context that exists right now and apply it to how to make this card good? That's very level 1 kind of thing, right? And what you're talking about is almost certainly what they're doing, which is saying like, look, this card needs more support and it'll be more satisfying when that happens, as opposed to just like, it's really big. Go do the quest that kind of doesn't feel good to do, so you get the really big guy.
Oh, this is my life. So for your viewers who don't know Flesh and Blood is a hero-centric game. You start with a hero in play, you choose your equipment, your weapon for that hero, and then you play the game. And right now we have, I don't know what the exact count is. It's maybe 60 plus legal heroes in our main competitive format. And some of them are really freaking bad. Like just they're not viable. You can't bring them to a tournament. I would say for a game that has so much focus on competition the way our does, a great number of them are viable. For instance, we just had Worlds. I think there were 26, 27 different heroes represented in our CC round. So those are 27 unique deck identities played at the absolute highest level. For me, that's what success looks like. For a lot of our players, they want every single hero to be viable. And doing that, at least in the short term, is actually easy. All I have to do is give this hero broken numbers and they'll be viable. They'll absolutely be a threat in the metagame, but that's not satisfying. That's not where you actually want your hero to be in the end. You want them to do it in a way which feels in touch with their identity and pays you off for the suffering you've been through as you've waited for your hero to be good by giving you the fantasy that that hero's text box promised in the first place, not just saying, oh, you're better on numbers than everything else. And that's what putting 20 on this card, I think that's mostly what it does is like, okay, now the numbers are just better.
I'll be honest with you, I don't even think it makes it like
Maybe
like,
I have no I have no clue.
yeah,
If that's
like
true.
that's kind of the thing, right? Where it's like, I agree that if that's what this was doing by making the card busted, that would be a bad thing to do. I just kind of think it needs 20 to make me want to even look at it.
Mm,
I'm like, I do think that like that is like a very real thing that sort of the nature of being a content creator means you have to be a little bit more focused on the now than the nature of being a game designer. And I
absolutely.
think that is a notable difference in like not just my perspective, but a lot of people's perspective, because one of the things Marvel Snap does really, really well is balance cadence, right? And I think a lot of people look at like, you guys balance the game every 2 weeks. Why is it not perfectly balanced? And the answer is that's not a thing. That's not a thing. And if it
Not
was,
real.
we wouldn't want it. The point is the fluidity, right? And that is something that I have had to learn to like understand. Like it's just one of those things where like as a creator, your first instinct is like, why wouldn't you just make it perfectly balanced? And it's like, well, 'cause that's stupid. That's a stupid
And
dumbass
impossible. It can be
premise.
both. It can be both.
That is definitely something that I've had to like genuinely grasp. Is like, what do you mean perfectly balanced? Like, is that fun?
Mhm.
How is that fun? Where's the fun? What are you talking about? Merlin, at the start of each turn, add an incantation to your hand. Just to be clear, each turn meaning he's got to be on the board. This is not like a permanent passive effect or anything like that. Omniversal Presence. Replace this location with a new one and give Merlin +2 power. Once in future, shuffle your lowest power card here into your deck to get +2 energy next turn. And Polymorph. On reveal, transform your lowest power character here into one that costs 1 more.
All right. Polymorph sucks. Like I'm not rolling the dice with that. I just don't trust it. I'm not about that life.
Okay.
I am a competitive player. I would like some consistency. And I just know like there's too many cards in Marvel Snap.
Yeah, I'm going to
at
roll
this point.
Destroyer. I can't play Polymorph.
Yeah, it just feels like there's so many bad outcomes potentially that could come from that. The other two looked quite good. Is there any kind of, is it just random of these three every time?
I think
And
I don't know this for a fact. I think it's weighted in some way. I think like when you
yeah.
get one, you're less likely to get a duplicate. I think
Mhm.
it's something like that. I don't know if it's impossible to get a duplicate, but I do know that I've played the shit out of this card because it's cool as hell. And I don't think I've gotten duplicates as much as you would statistically expect to get duplicates. I think there's
Okay.
like a Spotify shuffle algorithm thing going on where like
Yeah,
if you
yeah.
actually give people true random, they're like, this isn't true random. So they're just like,
Yep.
what if we don't do that?
Okay. I think that's a point in this card's favor. I mean, maybe I'm just off on Polymorph and it is good, but the other two looked promising to me. They look like you could build around them. Investing 2 and you're still getting 3 power, like that's okay. I can live with that investment. I also remember a card you made me look at last time, which did some pretty similar things. It was a 1-drop Nico something.
Oh yeah, Nico Minoru. Yeah.
Yeah.
Also a spellcaster, but they hadn't invented spells at the time. So, to be clear, they're not called spells; they're called skills, legally distinct
course.
spells. Naturally,
Yep, that's good. What was the cost on these 3 spells too?
They're
They were
all one.
cost?
they're all one.
Okay.
Yeah.
What? I don't love that part of it. That's a little off-putting. But I don't have to play them. I'm gonna go with this is good. I think just having more flexibility in a game like Marvel Snap is good. More cards in hand, more options, and I feel like Merlin's options are pretty good. I am curious to hear about Polymorph and whether that's as bad as I think it is.
It's not. It's quite good. The thing about Merlin though is what makes Polymorph good is that this card is really strong at baseline just by like it's a good card. It gives you location control. Having built-in location control is something that's really good, but gets better the better a player you are because you are more able to identify and deal with an aspect of the randomness that is in this game. Imagine if like you had a card that like it like sort of naturally undid some mana screw, right? Or mana flood. That kind of thing is sort of what Merlin can do because that's where the randomness is in Marvel Snap. But the other 2 spells ask you really specific questions in deck building, which makes him a lot less of a generalist than you would want him to be because you want things that are really good to polymorph. A card where all of its power is in the on reveal, but still costs whatever it costs. You polymorph that. That's great value. Like even there are bad rolls, but like it's generally just a really good thing to do. Same goes for cards that you want to flush away back into your deck for the extra energy. When the power is located in the ETB, you do a lot of that stuff. This guy is played with a lot of like Ravenous Chupacabra. If you could turn your Ravenous Chupacabra into a random 5 in Magic, you'd be like, oh, okay, this is like gaining +3 effectively a lot of the time. I like that. We're gonna say like it averages out of like 5/5 or whatever. That's valuable for one, right? And that's a lot of what Merlin does. He's in decks that are specifically built for him. I kind of think he's the perfect Marvel Snap card because he is so powerful, but asks so much of you to access all of that power. So you can play him as just like, I am playing this card, and sometimes I get the location guy, and sometimes I get a relevant polymorph thing, but mostly he's just like a 2/3 that puts cards in my hand, and I'm doing stuff like that. Or you can play him fully built around. And he's obviously better in the second case because you are investing in him. And that's exactly how cards should feel, I think.
Yeah, I would have pegged this as just a generally strong card. The context of the build around, though, makes perfect sense, having heard it. But that tells me that, like, this card's probably really freaking good in that scenario where you're building around it because I was able to envision its use as just a generalist card. And then with hard focus on it, I'm sure this card has a lot to offer those decks.
He's kind of been on the borderline of like, if you're a competitive player and you've been playing this game for like 6 months, you've probably looked at this card and been like, they could nerf this. Like, you've probably looked at this and been like, I don't know why this guy has 3 power, or I don't know why he gets +2 from the Omniversal Presence. You probably looked at this card and been like, there's like one number here that's probably a little too high. That is definitely the kind of guy that he is, where he's exactly on that borderline where you're like, I'm not that mad about him, but like there's a number here that's maybe.
But I could be talked into being mad about him by my
Yeah.
favorite content creator.
I actually don't think so. I think he also has this thing where he's just cool. Where like a lot of things that people get mad about, they're not cool and they're annoying. And Merlin is like powerful, cool, not annoying, just generally does interesting stuff. Like, I really do think that if they could make every card this kind of card, they would. It's just like this is like a 1 in 100 elite design thing that they've done with what this guy is. Even though he is probably a little too good, he skates on being cool.
Something's got to be the best card in the game. You'd rather it be cool than boring. Just numbers. Nobody wants numbers to be the best thing.
And I think the thing is, I don't think nobody's ever like, Merlin's the best card in the game. even when he has been the best card in the game, nobody is like, it's Merlin's fault. It's always something else. And I think that really speaks to like the way in which he's able to be good and useful and interesting. He just adds a lot of texture in a way a lot of cards are unable to.
Yep, makes sense.
All right, y'all. Thank you so much for watching. As always, I've been KM Best. He's been Brian Gottlieb, the czar of Flesh and Blood, despite his desire for me to not call him that. I thought it was a good analogy. Because you're not the president of Flesh and Blood. You're the czar of Flesh and Blood. The president is above the czar for reasons that I don't actually understand in terms of why we use that stuff.
I don't know what a czar does, so I don't know if I want to claim that title.
It's like, you know, like whenever there's like a crisis, right? They'll appoint someone to be like the point man for that crisis. And like that guy is referred to as like the czar. That's what's happening there. You're like the Secretary of State of Flesh and Blood.
I don't want anything to do with any aspects of government at this stage, but yeah, I appreciate that. Like I said, I really love what I do, and I love what you do. I will say, doing this, I really want to play some Marvel Snap. So I am begging that I find some entry point. Like y'all just let me know. Like let me know how I'm supposed to come on board, because I would really love to, and I don't quite understand how right now. And I know that's a really complicated question. Like Flesh and Blood in particular, we've at times had this reputation as just inaccessible. You know, too expensive is a criticism that gets put our way a lot, and at times fairly so. And we've just launched this new format we are calling Silver Age, and it's made of entirely commons, rares, and basic cards, which are like tokens in Flesh and Blood. And it's coming with a load of pre-constructed decks, and not pre-constructed decks as like, here's your starting point, pre-constructed decks as in, here's like potentially the best deck in the format, and you don't need to spend a dime more, and it's $20 and you're good. And not only can you play at your local game store, but we're going to have ProQuest in this format to qualify you for our Pro Tour. And by the way, our Pro Tour is also going to use this format, and we're going to play it at the highest level, and you can just get a share of the $2 million we're offering to our competitive circuit by playing this format, where your deck is going to cost you $20. Now, it has taken us, the game is 6 years old now, and it's taken us 6 years to get to this point, to have this on ramp, and we're really freaking excited about it. But it's hard. It's really hard to figure out the right configuration that respects your player's time, puts forth a compelling play experience. I hope Marvel Snap can kind of come to the table with something that speaks to me in that same fashion, where I'm just like, yep, I can get back in now, because the game looks beautiful. It looks super interesting. I love the general design philosophy. Artwork remains stunning. And I think the core game is one of the most brilliant game designs I've ever seen. So I really have nothing but good things to say about Marvel Snap.
Yeah, I will say today, like literally just today, they finally did pre-cons for the new players that you get by going through the new player experience. So like, I know like it took you guys 6 years. I fear they may be on the same timeline, but they are moving the direction you're talking about, right? What is it, I guess, for you? Because I got to tell you, as a card game player of other games, I was a budget gamer. That is what I was until I started, and this is going to sound reductive, being a winning gamer. And then it was like, all right, this is just the playing field I have to be on, right? Like, it's not even a question. If you show up to a Pro Tour and you're like, I did this for a budget, they'll laugh at you, right? Like, what are you going to try to go beat Paulo on a budget? Are you kidding me? Right? Like that kind of stuff. What is it that made you look at this and say, like, not only do we want to explicitly support that, I guess my question is like, what was the dev timeline on this? Like, how long was this in the pipeline where you were like, I want this, but it's a pipe dream, to I want this and I have a viable path towards it?
A while. And it's not so much to say this implementation is something that had to sit in the pipeline for years and years and years. It's a process of trying a ton of different implementations. And I know like the end result we got to sounds pretty simple. It's like, oh, it's just these cheap cards. Obviously, you've made your cheap format. But the exploratory process was way more complicated than that. And the work to actually get this kind of simple mode to work involved a lot of seeding cards in sets over the years. It involved a lot of foresight. It involved a lot of thinking about format rotation and banned and restricted lists and hours of gameplay to make sure like certain gameplay elements weren't overrepresented. Like for instance, in our budget formats, it is very easy. I'm trying to think of like how to explain this without getting too into the weeds and in a way that is still interesting to your audience. So essentially there's like number output in Flesh and Blood, very much the same as how many numbers you're going to put into a lane. And then there is defensive output, which is supposed to counter your opponent's number output. And defensive output stays pretty static across rarities, whereas number output kind of gets better as you get into higher rarity stuff.
Yeah, that makes sense.
If
That's
that
where the
makes-
cool cards are. You put the bigger number
Correct.
output on your mythic. Yeah, it makes sense.
Correct. And I mean, it's the same across all card games, but it manifests in a weird way in Flesh and Blood, where a lot of the time in the budget format, the best thing to do is find value and defend a lot. And that's not that interesting. Like it's cool once in a while. It's a mode of playing Flesh and Blood, but it can't be the only mode. So we really had to work to go ahead and shape the format into a space where it's doing what makes Flesh and Blood, what I truly and firmly believe makes this game the best competitive game on the market. It has to still have the hero identity aspects. It still has to have the depth of strategic planning. It has to do all the things that make our game phenomenal at these lower rarities. And that took a lot of time to figure out, but it was always something we were conscious of. And, you know, I suspect seeing the level of brilliance and just foresight I see from Marvel Snap, I suspect they're trying to deliver on these experiences in the exact same fashion at the highest level. They don't want a bullshit version of their game to be the budget version of the game. They have to find a way to make it all work. And when they do, I will happily sign up and engage with it.
That is exactly the like sort of specific thing. Like when you were able to talk about like the way in which the budget version of the game would not be exciting, right? Like when you look at Magic and the Pauper format, a lot of it is carried by two things. One, cards that were printed at Common forever ago and shouldn't have been printed at Common.
Decades ago.
Yes. And two, cards that are printed at Common very recently that have been crept into a power level that actually makes sense in that format. And it sort of accidentally ends up being a compelling format in large part because of a billion mistakes they made 30 years ago. And that is a really, like, no other card game has that built in. You have to go put those, not mistakes, but like you have a lot more control over what this format actually is in that way. And it's, I do think that it is a big challenge for Marvel Snap because people talk about drafting Marvel Snap. I've played a couple of Marvel Snap drafts. A lot of the time they do feel like a bullshit version of the main game, right? Like if you're second dinner and you're trying to do draft mode, how do you not make this feel like a bullshit version of actually just playing the game? That's a really important question. And the amount of time it takes to answer, I think that is like a genuinely a notable thing here.
Yeah, these things are never as easy as they appear to be. And I'm a huge fan. I don't remember whose quote it is, but it's become very much circulated in game development circles now. But it's like you release a bad game and it's bad forever, but a delayed game can eventually be good. And it's same thing with game modes and, you know, products and alt modes of gameplay. It's just zero desire to tie our name to something that isn't up to the highest quality standards. And I expect it's the same thing going on here. So
yeah, that makes a ton of sense. Brian Gottlieb, thank you so much. Final plugs for your game. Even like we've just been talking about your game for 15 minutes. Tell everyone about it anyway.
Yeah, go play Flesh and Blood. We have the Silver Age format launching very soon. I believe it's in February when we finally come to the table with these Silver Age pre-constructed decks. They're called Chapter 1 and Chapter 2, cover 10 of our coolest heroes. You can go to fabtcg.com, fabtcg.com. Search for us on YouTube if you want to see what we're all about. We just wrapped our World Championships this weekend, crowned our new world champion, took home $100,000 cash and a bunch of other goodies. So if you're a competitive gamer, I am telling you, I wouldn't say this shit just because I work here. We have the best competitive circuit in TCGs. I mean it. I mean it for a fact. We're going to be putting on 38, I believe is the number, high-level events next year all around the world. We go to Japan, we go to China, we're all over Europe, we do South America, all over North America. It really is embracing that old school ethos of making a lifestyle out of this stuff and just being all over the globe with your friends week in and week out, and competing in an incredible TCG.
Play the game, see the world. And as always, I have been KM Best. This has been Brian Gottlieb, and I will see you in the next one.